The other main collection of political philosophies lives under the category, under the word anarchism. Now, what does anarchism mean to you? When you think about anarchism, most likely you think about the word anarchy. What anarchy probably means to you? Chaos. It is life, it is disorder. It is somehow fundamentally to be avoided. Well, I'd like you to put that popular image to the side for a second and try and put yourself in historical context. Try and understand how intellectuals in particular, looking to the European countries which have very strong state, looking to the United States where the state seems to be increasingly allied with capital against workers, and also living under a very oppressive imperial regime. Picture these people trying to imagine a world without such oppressive power. Anarchism was a political philosophy to which Palchinski was drawn. Palchinski, as Graham reports, was very much interested in the work of Petr Kropotkin rather than Mikhail Bakunin, whose anarchist philosophies argued for a more need for a more violent method of government transformation. But it's important to understand this because the anarchist philosophies form the basis for Palchinski's thinking, as well as for one continuing strand in Soviet thinking. So think of one way of thinking about anarchism, or a good way of thinking about anarchism, as organization, as somehow communal organization of people without the presence and intervention of a state. It emphasizes small-scale local structures. Anarchist philosophies tend to share a faith, a belief in the essential decency of people. That's one of the images that they carry with them. There's also a very strong desire for individual freedom, and in that sense it's a product of the Enlightenment and of Western philosophies that conceive of society as collections of individuals, and a strong intolerance for domination. So anarchism is about believing in people's willingness to give to one another while desiring freedom from themselves and desiring to avoid domination. Now, if you look at the history of anarchism, there are dozens of different kinds of anarchism with names such as mutualism, collectivism, anarcho-communism, anarcho-syndicalism, pacifist anarchism. Let me give you just a couple of examples to introduce you and to help you find your footing here. First, in 1793, William Godwin publishes a work called An Inquiry Concerning Political Justice. And in this work, Godwin, who lived from the 1750s to the 1830s, makes the case that the common good ought naturally to take primary consideration over selfish individual desires. Contrast this sharply with enlightened self-interest, which takes for granted selfish individual desires and builds a whole moral structure on top of them. From Godwin's point of view, the common good takes primary consideration over selfish individual desires. And take account in yourselves of your own commitment to a common good. More than likely through your participation in say religion, or in a fraternity, or in a political system, or in a university. By virtue of your presence in a university, you feel some sense of commitment to a common good. This is part and parcel of, or one of the implicit products of Enlightenment theorizing. The individual also, or people as individuals, also feel a sense of commitment to a common good. Anarchism emphasizes this. Humans are inherently rational, according to Godwin, therefore capable of realizing the all-around benefits of social justice. So reason is somehow connected to working towards benefiting the whole. Given adequate freedom, social justice could therefore be secured in a society based upon an honest interaction of small, independent groups of people. So we have here the foundations of a movement towards small-scale organizations of people committed to working together with one another. Another early theorist and influential theorist is Pierre Joseph Proudhon, lived in the early 1800s until 1860s, who reimagined the concept of property. We take for granted that individuals should possess property. Well, if you reason instead from the common good, individual property is an appropriation from the common good. Property, from Proudhon's point of view, was theft. The regime of contracts, he argued, substituted for the regime of laws, should constitute the true government of man and the citizen, the true sovereignty of the people, the republic. In other words, he's trying to build a whole system that involved positive contracts among people, apart from laws instituted by the state and designed implicitly to extend and manage proprietary relationships or the existence of individual property. Again, an emphasis on common good, commitment to the whole. Now we take a look briefly at the two theorists that influenced Palchinski. Firstly, Mikhail Bakunin lived early 1800s, again until the 1870s. He was the son of a Russian aristocrat, imprisoned for 15 years for insurrectional activity, and then moved to London in the 1860s. In his book, God and the State, published in 1871, he argues for rejection of all forms of imposed authority, all forms of authority imposed by groups of people on themselves or other groups of people, which he distinguishes from natural authority, which he characterized, for example, in the matter of boots. People should bow to the authority of the bootmaker, who had expertise, but not to some community, let's say, of bootmakers who want to have authority over individual bootmaking processes. So he wrote, quote, "I bow before the authority of special men because it is imposed upon me by my own reason." So you find, in other words, in anarchist philosophies here, a willingness to accept expertise, a willingness to accept technology and benefits of technology to the common good, provided they work to the common good, and specifically in opposition to the maximization of self-interest. He also wrote in 1871, quote, "In a word, we reject all legislation, all authority, and all privileged, licensed, official, and legal influence, even though arising from universal suffrage." So even when everyone gets to vote, we reject the power of the state, which can become oppressive. Convinced that the state can turn only to the advantage of a dominant minority of exploiters against the interests of the immense majority in subjection to them. This is the sense in which we are really anarchists. So Bakunin is making the case that every state, no matter what its objectives, no matter how noble its goals, will eventually become the tool for a minority against a majority. And he argued for the overturning of a state, even if necessary, even if it were necessary to do so through violent means. The theorist that influenced Palchinski the most, again, was Petr Kropotkin. Born in the 1840s, lived into the third decade of the 20th century. This man was a Russian prince, also a geographer. He believed that the transition to an anarchist ideal could be achieved peacefully, which he expressed in books in 1896 called The State, Its Historic Role, and in 1898 a book called Fields, Factories, and Workshops. In the first book, Kropotkin wrote, "There are those, on the one hand, who hope to achieve the social revolution through the state by preserving and even extending most of its power to be used for the revolution. And there are those, like ourselves, who see the state, both in its present form, in its very essence, and in whatever guise it might appear, an obstacle to the social revolution, the greatest hindrance to the birth of a society based on equality and liberty, as well as the historic means designed to prevent this blossoming. The latter work to abolish the state and not to reform it. So he's now, as theorist, arguing with those who want to concentrate power in the state as a vehicle for serving the common good, making the case what we need to do is not have a strong state. We need to have some sort of local system from the bottom up. He also wrote, either the state forever crushing individual and local life, taking over in all fields of human activity, bringing with it all its wars and domestic struggles for power, its palace revolutions which only replace one tyrant by another, and inevitably at the end of this development there is death. Or the destruction of states and new life starting again in thousands of centers on the principle of the lively initiative of the individual and groups and that of free agreement. The choice lies with you.